Welcome to One Page Story Extravaganza Livestream with Run C Man. I write and illustrate a one-page story every day based on ideas that come from viewers like you. Maybe today will be your idea. Okay, here we go. All right. Hi, everybody. I hope people have been having a good day. I've been having a good day. Monday's the day I like to make comics. Well, every day's the day I like to make comics. Okay, today's page is part one of two. Part one of Duo. Part one of Deuce. So I started this last week. And I'm going to switch the camera for a second to show you something. I got lots of fun things to show today. So this is how much of it I actually drew. I drew this entire page where I have additional scenes where somebody's holding a couple of pizzas, and then we got a pizza, and then we got a bunch of people in a restaurant eating pizza. And so you can see that there's twice as much page laid out that I actually presented in today's story. Sometimes that happens. What I mean by that is when you lay something out and you structure something together that, you have an idea of this is where I'm going to go with things. And then as you're finishing it, as you're going through the process of finishing it off, you suddenly realize, this is kind of sufficient for what I want to talk about. Like, we don't have to draw everything that I'd laid out, and it's not that it's not interesting or that it's there's no point in finishing this stuff, it's stupid. It's nothing nonsensical like that. It's just a case of you have this idea that really takes hold when you get to a certain point, and you're like, I'm going to try this and lay this out as such. So that's where I left this page. So the finished page, you can see. I'll put in camera, and then I'm going to say, hi, Linda. Hi, Tim. Welcome aboard. So there's where the page actually went. And you get my noggin out of the way. Big head. There we go. So there's the finished page. And it just becomes this sort of, there's a comfortableness and that takes a hold when you've done a certain amount of it. And rather than trying to hectically finish, I got to do all this other stuff. I got to add all this other material, all these other elements. No. You're really feeling good about the part of it that you have finished. It doesn't mean that you can't continue and finish the rest of it, but you don't have to right now. And you don't have to try to rush it, make a sloppy mess out of it. You don't have to follow through so much on that other part, because you're already covering the initial idea that you wanted to lay out. It's just not as maybe not as involved as it was. I think it's important that when we're working on projects, we're only blessed with so much time sometimes, really, and take the win, right? So there's today's page. First trip to a pizzeria, and just reminiscing about a pizzeria that was in my neighborhood when I was a kid growing up. Probably not the first pizzeria I ever went to, but the first one that I can honestly remember a full experience at. So there we go. So there's the original art, or there's the finished page. There's the original layout for the whole page and the art that was completed. I mean, I can still finish the rest of it and add some more to this conversation. But my point is that, I was doing X, Y, Z this weekend. We had some people staying down here with us at the house, and so, sometimes in order to take the time that something needs, you have to make some decisions. So there we go. So there's that. Now, a couple more things. So this is one of the side things I've been talking about. But what this does is it also gives an example of what I've talked about And what I tried to show last week, there's a page that I laid out last week on the stream, and this is, I scanned it and put some borders on it just to show you. But this is the 8-ball in the corner pocket page that I was working on, and my sound is quiet today. Uh-oh. Oh. Sorry, one sec. I knocked my microphone off. I'm so sorry. Is that better? Yeah. I think so. I knocked my microphone onto the floor. Silly, silly, silly goose that I am. There we are. I got two. I have two of these bad boys. So that, back up. So I apologize for that. Is that better, Linda? I hope so. All right. So, so there we go. Where was I? Yeah, so today's, the thing that I started on Friday with that page layout, hopefully you're picking me up okay there. I hope so. All right, so the page that I started breaking down on Friday was what you see on the screen now, and that is 8-ball in a corner pocket. So the idea there is my head is an 8-ball was the suggestion, and so we played with some visual aspects of it there. There's a person holding their head up. My head is an 8-ball as a crowd walks past or through them. And then the following panels are them trying to... Okay, thank you so much, Linda. The people are trying to avoid this weirdo with an 8-ball head. And it ends with person, securing themselves in an alleyway here and trying to get a new perspective on the world, kind of rounding out the idea. See what I did there? 8-ball round. Anyhow, so an 8-ball in the corner pocket as the title, and it ends up with a person tucked into that corner of an alley at the end. So so this is the page, and what I did when I drew this page out is that I used a couple of different colors of pencil, so that I could show these different layers of elements, one above the other, so on and so forth. And in doing that, it helps to understand in the process of drawing out said page what you mean to be where. So that as you go further with this and you start picking out those details and picking out those elements, you're more readily able to discern one thing from another. So I've been working on inserts for this larger project as I'm finishing off this book that I've been talking about finishing off for a few years. Put it aside, and now I'm coming back and tying it all together. So I started drawing title cards, and what title cards are, let me see if I've got some examples. So a title card is basically a sort of insert between chapter A and chapter B. Like this is, here we go. This is a title card, right? The first part, feeling blue, So there's a page as presented, and then it immediately goes into that next story. So that's what a title card's purpose is. But I find this to be kind of bland. Now, the only way that this actually does work is the fact that if you follow the squiggly fairy line pattern here, when we flip over to the next page and it continues on, and these two pages are intended to be across from one another, as it carries on and you realize, boop, down here by the end of it, it's been the flight trail of a little fairy version of me. And just playing with that whole opening of Walt Disney films in the past where you'd have Tinkerbell, skitter through the air and then touch the screen, and the company logo would come up for Walt Disney. So I'm just being silly with that. So that element of it works. So there's parts that I'm considering to keep, but for the most part, it is a little flat And as I've gotten better over time of doing a lot of the one-page stuff, is that I realize I don't want flat screens like that. I don't want just static. There's nothing to this. Especially when later on I'm really playing with textures and colors, and this is the film that they're watching. Things like that. So that's Miriam. Hiya, Miriam. How you doing? Miriam, the page I just posted up, the page that I'm finishing from your suggestion. It's right there. My head is an 8-ball. So I'm going to be finishing that off tonight. But this is a page we drew in colored pencil on the Friday. So thank you for that suggestion, Miriam. It's good to see you. So I've got all these pages that I've broken down for this larger book already, and I was just sort of going through them and making some of those decisions about where do we go next with this. Now, initially, I had visiting my son in Madrid. Nice. Well, hi to your son. How nice to do my suggestion. Of course, I've got a few more of your suggestions lined up in the next little bit. I'm going back and making sure I fill in and get done all the older suggestions that to try to get done. So this is the way I laid out the story in the first place, in a sort of profile format. But it's just too blocky. I found that the pacing of it really felt kind of compressed. So this is why I switched it to this landscape format and then reused these materials and added a bunch of elements to them, and played with time and space a little bit more, and am quite happy with where it's gone since. So robot, UFOs, how can you go wrong with those things? So this is the sort of thing that I've been trying to fill in. So these title cards that I've talked about, like so. So what I've got intended instead is to add in visual elements for each of these chapters. And so in one chapter, here's our character running across, running down this street. And so here he is in front of the front of a building. And flying through the air behind him is a shoe. And drawing the shoe in this way, and the reason I drew the compositions for the backgrounds through the shoe, is that I'm going to cut the shoe out and flip it over and reduce it down in size a little bit, because he's about to get bonked in the back of the head by this person's shoe. Hope you're having a wonderful time, wonderful visit, says Linda to Miriam. Yeah, of course. I think it's going to be awesome. Madrid, too. Yes. Went to Museum del Prado. My soul is full of inspiration. Excellent. Oh, Miriam's off for a call. That's excellent. So taking these little elements, I'm turning them into just line art and removing the white background, and then I can, shift things and flip things and make a few different layers for the few different elements, and remove the shoe from the composition here and on this side because the building's behind it. And then here's another title card where a character is running around a street corner, and I have to draw in the clothing as yet. But he's running around this street corner trying to evade this giant teddy bear. And it's an interesting story. So there's a bunch of things to play around with that. And but drawing it and working it all up in this way, where you can add, it helps to understand the teddy bear and the bicycle as being different from the building elements. It just lets you overlap things and not have them bleed in together. And then having the character being drawn in this pink in order to distinctly separate them. So it sort of helps you to understand the different pieces of information in that composition. So there's another title card. Here's another title card, which is a far more simplistic. It's called Bad Teddy. And it's really short little mini story about a teddy that goes wrong. And then there's another title card in process here called homogeneous. You know how two things are alike. And so here's two of the characters, the main character and another character is introduced in the story, having a little fun moment, like an old Bing Crosby, Danny Kaye type moment, you know, where the two of them practically breaking into song and looking silly, like they're pressing up against each other in a mirror. And of course, they don't look like one another, but they are the same. Is what comes across in the story. Is that even though characters are very different in different lives and things like that, we're all underlying, you know, underlying the surface. There's similarities that we have that you know, it's important to embrace. And I got a few more, you know, but there's me just roughing some things together. This is I have these to show you. Here's the overall story title card that takes place before part one. That's there, but I've removed my old stamped letters, story and art, Christopher Runtsman, and taken this out, left the story and art part, but we've added by Ron Seaman. So, you know, little changes. But this is a piece of the original art for this page, or for this book. And so scanning this and inverting it, so you know, switching the white areas out to any place that you see blue basically becomes white, and anything that you see white disappears. And in order to use that as a title card piece of information, because when you flip over in the first page, and I showed you this page, this is just a poster on the page, you know, at this club. So yeah, so I thought maybe we'll show the whole picture, the ding dong picture. So this is a mixed media thing of blue and black pen with white ink and a cyan blue ink. And then you can see in here, maybe you can or maybe you can't, I don't know, but there's a discoloration that runs through here. That's a piece of masking tape. That and there's another one, there's another one. There's a piece of I think that might be some Post-it or something like that. So there's a number, maybe on the back side you can see. No, yeah, I was hoping you could maybe see some of the shapes of the paper, or of the add-ins. And then there's a big one across here. So the whole purpose of doing that and putting together a page like this is that it just adds some interesting complexity to the process. And if you have, and I have in the past, had a problem with white pieces of paper, and those little sort of feelings that we get about, oh, I don't want to wreck this paper, I don't want to interfere with what I'm doing, destabilize the paper, destabilize the surface of the paper, scribble on it, put stick tape on it, you know, spill ink on it, slap and drag the ink across the page, let it dry, and then try to draw on this strange, you know, smush of color in your background. You know, and put in all kinds of tissue paper and stuff like that into the surface that you're working on. Have fun, but attack it. You're in charge. Don't go settle in for this white page's power over you. Anyways, so there's that one of the original pages from the portrait format, which I like this image a lot. I think it works pretty well. So I sort of felt kind of silly of just making this into a single panel, you know, poster in the background. I thought I might want to do something more with that. So I'm still playing with the idea of it. So there's some of the things that I've been doing, and doing some of the workups too. And here's another one, Kidnap Action is another chapter. And it's these people sitting in a van across from a movie theater waiting to, you know, kidnap a guy as part of the overall narrative. So that's another title card that's being worked on. And so, you know, it's a process, but I'm having fun with it. For those that might not know this, I got this in the mail. Mr. Jim Luhan, there's his name right there. Look it up. Check him out. Has finished his first full feature film. And I mean, he's done a ton of projects, and he's done a ton of segments that he's linked together and crafted a full film from. And, you know, but now this is his first time doing a full-on film and animated by a single guy. I'll show you something. Let's see, where do I should have had these in hand before. Oh, I stepped on Corbin's toy. He's worked on full film projects before. He's worked on a number of shorts before. And I'll show you some of those. Here's some of his Getomation material that he did. Okay. And these are fantastic. But there's tons of shorts in here, you know, with all these characters. And a lot of these characters, you know, appear in the background of other segments. So pretty cool. And then, in addition to doing these, he's done a few, like I said, a few connected numbers of shorts that are in now into a long form or full feature film form. You know, and he's also wrote Revengeance and animated by Bill Plimpton. So phenomenal team up there, and two really fantastic animators, two really fantastic, you know, writer and creators. So really pleased to have this. But now, first full feature film by Jim himself, The Full Fungus, is done. And so I got this in the mail from Jim. I did some voice stuff for Jim, and then I got this in the mail, and this is a breakdown of all these characters in here. I did a lot of incidental characters on the side, so I don't know that any of the characters that I did voice work have a breakdown spot. I haven't seen any, but there's lots of things that are in here and related to scenes that I was doing too. So, like this is a character I did the voiceover work for. The golf, or not the golf, good heavens, the bowling announcer. Silly fun, but super cool and a great project. Lots of different characters in there and different scenarios and scenes going on in there. Just brilliantly funny though. So I really appreciate Jim sending this in the mail. And but it's available on his Amazon page. It's the Full Fungus Companion, and this is to go along with his film, and really exciting. So I've been really enjoying reading this. I arrived on Friday, or it arrived on Friday. I was expecting it on Saturday or Sunday, but suddenly I just heard this whack on my front porch, and I went out to look, and the delivery guy had just thrown it into the snow, and it's an envelope. So I had to make sure I brought it in, and I thawed it out, or because it was already cold for being in the truck, and it was wet because of being face down in the snow. For however short a time it was, he threw it in a snowbank. So thanks, guy. But I got it thawed out, and it's not. It's nice and flat. So I'm happy. I went out of my way with some paper towel and stuff like that to absorb all the water, and because just lovely book. So that's super cool, Jim. Thank you very much. And if you get a chance, check out The Full Fungus, folks. Look up what Jim's been working on here on YouTube, and there's lots of brilliant work by Jim. So what's the other thing? Oh yeah, this. So one page 2 is done and is on our Amazon page. It's kind of neat because it's the first. There's a thing you can do in your Amazon author page where, for your readers to have an easier understanding, you can put the books that are in series in this case, 1-page extravaganza 1 and 2, you can put those under a series header so that it comes up for the individual books. But if people are interested in series, it comes up in that as well. So it's kind of cool to do that. All the same layout, all the same approach to it, right? So the reason I did the cover art the way I did is so that it lets the reader go, what's the deal with this? And then when they open it, it's not too much shock and awe to the fact that the book is laid out this way. So yeah, so here's number 2, and it's got a whole bunch more pages, another 78-page book. So this is our 3rd hardcover on Amazon now. Very happy, very, very happy. Miriam says, so sorry, my mom called from Argentina. It's dinner time. Glad to see you. Oh, well, thanks very much for stopping in, Miriam. I really appreciate it. So yeah, so we've been having a little show and tell. So super cool day for book stuff, and having a lot of fun with these. Getting some nice responses on 1-page number 2 coming out, and looking forward to. We're in the process of putting together. Oh, Miriam says, I think it's perfect. That's very sweet of you. We've got number 3 in process for end of the year, but what we're focusing on now is that Stream of Conceitedness book. So there's a whole bunch of different things. I showed a layout on here. I showed the page where I have all the little thumbnails that lay out the story. Let me see if I've got that handy dandy to show you. I'm Mr. Joe organized, and yeah, there we go. So this is another one of the projects that I've been doing. Yeah, lots going on. So we're playing with a whole bunch of different motifs on this new book. And I'm having fun exploring some things, and really working on, well, I don't know where I put it. I got 7 projects on the go right now, folks, so lots of paperwork kicking around in here. So, and they're not all for me, so the ones that are for me are the easier to access things. Or the ones that aren't for me are the easier to access things. So, there's the whole thumbnail breakdown that I did of the book, and I'm going from that, and I'm filling in the spots that I either didn't finish or, embellishing those title cards. So once that's done, that book is ready to format and out into the weird, wild world. Yeah, weird, wild world out there. Yep. So, yeah, it's been the good kind of busy. So I can't complain. I got the book, he says, and then rocks his whole desk around. I got the book for suggestions, and I thought we'd take a swing at another one. Now I'm finishing off these other things right now as we speak, like the My Head is an 8-Ball page. We'll be finishing that up, and then in addition to that, I've got a whole bunch of prepped out pages that I didn't follow through. Similar to, at the end of the year, I showed 40 some odd pages on Patreon of all these additional stories that I'd written and illustrated and never followed through and finished as full pages. And these had come from suggestions as well. Let me see. Okay, yeah, here we go. So this is when I would do some of these thumbnail breakdowns, and I would write the story alongside it, right? They traveled through time and space, going from one adventure to another, bouncing about with abandon, largely due to the fact that they couldn't control their time-traveling machine. So here's a fun little story page. I'm good with that. I don't necessarily feel... I didn't necessarily feel compelled to finish it. Or here's one. I stand vigilant over my city. Here's a superhero guy. And ready for any battle areas in the middle of a battle with other super good guys and bad guys. I've been ready since birth. There he is as a baby looking over mom's shoulder. And here he is in the Bahamas saying, I could use a holiday. So, I've had fun doodling that, but I'm pretty good. And then anytime I would look at, anytime that I would look at other people's work and a page really stood out to me and I really wanted to sort of put that composition down because there's ideas in there that I really want to explore in my own way later on. I would doodle them in here as well, but I'd always put the word study on them. So that's telling me this isn't yours, this is somebody else's. Now here's a page where the giant ball crashes to earth, bounces once, and rolls to a stop. Yes, right on the spot. And this female character says, I don't get it. What's so exciting? And the first character says, it's a sports thing, dear. Even though this giant destructo ball was coming to, crash to the earth. So this is, and then on the inside of the pages, this is the only sketchbook I have where I don't draw on both sides of the page, by the way. There's the story twists. And so it's me talking about story points or, roughing out a story idea in here in the book in full. So it's in one spot. Here's a bunch of studies from somebody else's work. Some more of those. And again. And then this is where I start jumping back into applying some of the ideas I'd learned in those previous pages and putting together some sort of narratives on my own, which again, I didn't take any farther than these. So I ended up at the end of last year on Patreon putting up, I think it's 40, I don't know, something crazy number of these that I did over the course of the year. And so I've got a bunch of those I'm going to put up on Patreon. And because, I got to do something with them, and I've clearly not had it be something I'm developing further to put into one-page stories. And these are ideas that I've had more so than they are suggestions. But again, there's a couple studies, and then here's me playing with some ideas of my own. Studies again. Oh, I want to doodle this idea. And then I started realizing, you know what? Why am I not laying things out in this landscape format that I like to draw in? Maybe if I did that, I would feel more compelled to finish these pages off. And so there I go with that. And so these ideas, these scribbles here, are what inspired me to do the 15-page story at the start of the year. Is from these 4 pages here. And playing with story shapes and playing with character layouts and ideas. So I've been putting together a whole bunch more of them again. And like I said, I'll be collecting these and putting them on Patreon. And you've seen this. This is where I started drawing little elements and meant to come back and fill this out. Same thing here. More of these little layouts. So again, they're all collecting up, and we'll end up doing something with them or not, but we'll see. Just scribbling one day. So this book, what I did, and how I have some of these, they're all laid out the same way. And in case anybody here that sees this video today hasn't seen this before, I took a piece of copier paper and I measured the page to fit inside the sketchbook, the same size as the pages that are in said sketchbook. And so I cut it down, and then I measured out equal sized panels for this size of paper that's in the book. And so what I do each time is I lay that underneath the new page, and I just put little marks for where these panels are. And then I just rule them up on each page. And so you can see I think you can still make it out through the paper here. You can still see the page in behind. So that's I suggest people try that out if you you want a tidy book. I'm not one for a tidy sketchbook generally, but do what we can. Okay, so I've got this the suggestion book here, and I'm going to be honest. There's some suggestions that I've received over time that I haven't followed through on. Like one suggestion that I've got here, somebody wants a Gordon Ramsay page, and I'll look at that at some point and sort of figure out an angle on it. But I hate Gordon Ramsay. Never met him personally. Don't need to. But the obnoxiousness of that person on television makes me not appreciate them. So I don't want to celebrate that. I don't want to celebrate characters like that. And I don't want to be that guy who, so somebody suggests somebody that I don't like, so I'm going to do something terrible to him. I don't want to do that either. So if I come up with something, we'll do that page. But in the interim, we'll just let it sit. It's because I want to follow through on suggestions that people make. But I want to do it in a nice fashion, It's important that we can, hold on to our thoughts and our ethics there. So we've got all these suggestions kicking along here. There's some fun ones, that's for sure. The Mount Rushmore Canadian guy's named Brian. That's kind of a silly, fun kind of a page, a suggested idea. Series of unfortunate ellipses instead of events. That's cute. Who's that, Marsh? Haunting stuffed animals on safari. Well, there we go. Let's do that. That's suggested by Salty Snacks. Haunting stuffed animals on safari. I'll write it down. And there's Miriam's My Head is an 8-Ball suggestion. Oh, I said haunting. It's hunting stuffed animals. I think I said haunting. On safari. That's fun. And that's suggested by Salty Snacks. Not a brand, a guy. So there we go. There's today's suggestion. So we'll do this. And I don't know. I have no idea of how to begin, as per usual. So I think that I'll just arbitrarily choose an image. One of the things that I do, and I'll show you these are all files where you have a number of photos of just random pictures and images. Let me see if I can find a good one. Is this? Oh, there we go. Look at this. So this person has done all of these expressions and portraits of themselves looking in different directions. And they've done them in black and white as a silhouette. They've done them a light face and a dark background, dark face on a light background. There's all kinds of different approaches that this person has taken, which are fantastic resources for people to work on. That's as big as I can blow those up. And what's nice, whoops, I'm so sorry. What's nice about that is that because you don't have all the specific details, the reason that I like these so much is that it makes me think of the thing that I'm drawing more than I may do if I'm just looking at a picture and reproducing it. I think that when we use source imagery and when we use resources like those, whether it's a live model or photography or a magazine image, whatever it may be, it's still important that we understand the basics of the composition, the basics of the image that we're drawing, the shapes that make up said objects, the weight, how the light plays on that. If you're inserting a reference image into a page that you're drawing, and the entire thing is lit by an overhead light, and you insert a panel where the lighting is coming from underneath, which is completely the opposite, there's two things that are happening there. One, dead giveaway you're using resource imagery, because somebody's like, that's a completely opposite light source. That doesn't make any sense. And two, you know, you're sort of tying yourself down a little bit this way. So you're not really understanding the necessary elements of what it is that you're drawing as much as you are reproducing a drawing from an image that you've already got a hold of. So if it just takes a little more time and effort and frustration to actually just straight up figure out the ins and outs of how do I draw the thing which I want to draw. But it's worth it. Today's suggestions from Salty Snacks, hunting stuffed animals on safari. Thank you, Linda. I appreciate that. So this is the sort of resource that files that I'll look up. And, I know they're all tiny heads. Like here's an entire series of people doing facial expressions. And that's a great resource for you to use. Ideally, I would suggest that these, like the problem with this is that this person's relatively just looking at the camera. Doesn't necessarily give a big understanding of the side view of a person's face. I mean, there are some parts, that's just I can make it. There are some parts where you do see their head turned to the side. So if you're really relying on this in a direct reproduction kind of way, I mean, it's great. It gives you a real diverse range of expressions, but at the same time, all of those expressions are looking at you. So you might get something more out of taking the time to understand, if this face is shaped in such a way. And as you start to understand the shape language, which is inside of a person's face, you can tilt the angles on their face and start to have an understanding of where the nose is in relationship with the chin, etc., etc. And it's important that we have a lot of artists really are good at drawing them or a cartoonish style of people that look like them. It's important that we try to draw everybody in all the different beautiful diverse ways that our heads and our faces are shaped, male and female, so on and so forth. And at the same time trying to draw these things in such a way as to maintain who they are, and from every different angle, because you have an overall general understanding of them. And like here's another, these are clips. This is another way you can find these sorts of things. These are shots of a character's face in a film, and all the different they're trying to capture all the different expressions of said character. Now this character doesn't have an awful lot of expressions, whereas you've got this sort of a thing from I cannot remember the name of the director because I said the producer's name first. The new Aliens Romulus film. Brilliant director, brilliant character actors that are in it. But look at all of the different, angles of the character's face, as well as expressions therein. And so when you look at some of these things and you try to understand the shape of said face and how all those things develop together, the shapes and how they come up one on top of the other to build the structure, so that you can understand that the nose is closer to the camera or the frame of reference that we're looking through than, say, the ears, or under the chin as opposed to the point of your chin. So when you're studying these kinds of things, it's like you can see here, there's a panel right there, okay, and this is me testing out my new markers and trying to understand the structure and shape of that character's face. And it becomes more than just reproducing the image. Well, there's another image from another viewpoint of the character beside, See how big I can make. Well, that's it. So there's another image of the character looking in a different direction beside. So between these two things, I can understand what the top part of their head looks like, right? And there's great benefit to that. There's great reward to the idea of really understanding the subjects that you're drawing. And sometimes it's just playing like this. And, looking at different characters and different positions and, different perspectives, and really playing with how we apply line. How do we make this person look old and wrinkly, craggy? I tried to say craggy and wrinkled at the same time. It came out as wrinkly, I think it was. Or the soft lines to make this person look youthful, And so, yeah, it's really helpful to use some of these references like this, but at the same time to really allow yourself to creatively explore, putting those elements within your drawings, but not being entirely reliant or dependent upon them. Sorry, I just became really thirsty. Okay, so with that in mind, let's, we've got our hunting stuffed animals on a safari. Okay, so let's just draw some characters. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this. Let's see what I got here. Yeah, here we are. So here's an interesting perspective thing on how to draw people in dimensional, like in, this is a, trying to think what this perspective is called. It's a top-down view is basically what it is. But we're looking down on our characters and arraying them, in a nice spread of the way that their body is oriented, even though we're still looking at that orientation in the body from a top-down view. And so you'll see people turn to this way, people turn to that way. Things like this are helpful and practical as well. That's going to be my photo resource for us drawing the start of our hunting stuffed animals on safari. So let's get that out of the way. And the reason that I'm saying that that's our resource is that I think with the first image, what might be of benefit to us is, am I in frame? I picked up the green again, and it's not dark enough to see. So let's get rid of that. All right, so because I've got this, what I'm going to do is utilize that and explore that a little further. And so what we'll draw is we'll draw some of our characters that are sitting in a Jeep or some kind of vehicle on the safari. And so what we're doing is we're putting our nice rough line. And so I'm going to try to do this a little more often, folks, of trying to do some breakdowns like this with people. Just, from the query that was made last week, I think it was still last week, where it's helpful when somebody just sees me start drawing the finished line art. But at the same time, it's also very helpful to understand the little steps, the little noodles along the way for how we get to, just taking a face like this and drawing in the shadows and in the finished line work on our character, and and we understand all of the little tidbits about some expression in there, and do we really need to draw all of these other bits of information where we can just draw them in some kind of a finished way. Let's do the breakdown part together, okay? Because there might be some real benefit in that. And so we've got the camera coming down on this let me see if I can, there we go, this kind of angle. And so we're going to have our people, and let's have this guy holding on to the side of the vehicle. And we're going to have to make up our vehicle as well. So we're going to put his hands here on the side, And across the foreground, if the vehicle is going to, I'm trying to think, yeah, I guess it would be shaped thus. Okay, and we'll put a little bit of interesting complex shapes there. But what we'll do is we'll have, as we have our character sitting here in their seat, I mean, we can do a couple things like have their leg kick out of the side of the Jeep or things like that, just to make some interesting distinctions about our character. Well, he's so comfortable in where he's sitting. He's got his leg hanging out and he's bouncing around. Whereas this person, I'm trying to draw pensive and sitting in the vehicle as though he's very, unaccustomed to doing so. And so it's a little wild, bit of a wild ride for him. Some weird, wild stuff. We'll put the front windshield on a lot of Jeeps. You can see how they can fold it over in front and clip it onto the front of the hood of the vehicle. And so now we've got, and we'll put this person's hands gripping the front as well. Again, trying to play on that pensive part of our character. Hiya, AK, welcome aboard. Hi, world. So we can have their hair blowing back as they're driving here in the Jeep. But one of the fun things that we can do is have an awkward placement for their safari hat, which is tied by string to their neck. And so we'll have, here's the little strap on the side, and we'll have it around his neck, but hanging awkwardly at his back. And because, of course, the implication is that we're trying to get across is they're bouncing and rocking in the safari Jeep, but at the same time, the wind is just blowing in their face. So here's our driver, and in beside our probably rich guy who's paid for going to hunt these animals. And so we're going to put our driver in the vehicle beside them, okay? And as he's driving, I want to think of something. So I want to have one hand on the wheel. There's our first, identifier for our character in his eccentricity. We'll put one hand on the wheel, and at the same time, let's have him holding his gun with his other and not looking at the road and yakking at our guy. Okay? So as he's driving, he's really not overly concerned in comparison against the really rigid body language of our first guy. So we're trying to sell across some of the elements of our character in our first executed image that says self-assured, not self-assured, and just sort of playing around with these notions. But so if I've got, so what I'll do is this. I'll have this arm up like so, and his hand holding onto his gun. And said gun, as he's driving in his bouncing, rocking and rolling Jeep, his gun is going to sit on his knee. So he's going to have his leg up in the air as though his foot is hanging outside of the door, like I talked about on this side. And he's got his gun sitting on top of it as he's driving. And we can play on this notion here as well by having a panel where we have, watch out! And he pulls the Jeep to a halt and immediately takes a shot. Or he veers wildly and, tries to take a shot off the side as he goes in this crazy turn. There's a whole bunch of different things that we can do with this. So anyways, here's our first two guys. And so there's our steering wheel, and the conversation, of course, for this starts to write itself as we're drawing our characters in. And our suggestion again for today is hunting stuffed animals on a safari. And thank you again to Salty Snacks for that suggestion. So here's our two guys in the Jeep, and we can really play with the whole bouncing craziness bit by having a third person in the background, and this is where we get to play with what that idea might be. So if we've got our accustomed person who's driving, we've got our unaccustomed tourist who's wholly dependent on this guy not flipping the Jeep over for them to survive. And in our background, we're going to put our third character. Now, one of the things that we can do with the third character is if we put, let's say, something like roll bars in, okay? And roll bars, I'll just pencil them in loosely like so. So roll bars is when there's a rough metal-shaped cage around the part of the vehicle which we sit in, the cab, on those vehicles where you can peel off the walls and the roof if it's a canvas set up like a Jeep, and now you've just got your people riding, in their vehicle without roof, but there's still some modicum of safety, some illusion of safety for them. Another interesting drawing. I'm a bit late today. Oh, well, you're very welcome, AK, and I appreciate that. So we've laid in these aspects with this purple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to another color that I hope you can see. There we go. We'll use this red. Okay, so we're going to draw our person in the background, and so we want to show them being tossed and flopped around in that background. So one of the ways we can do that is really play with the comedic aspect of it, and that is to let's try this. We'll have their face forward. We'll put their shoulder up here. Okay, we've got their one hand wrapped around this bar. Okay, so the idea is that they're holding on, and the bar tucks into underneath their arm. Okay, and then we can have them as they're standing in the background, and we'll place their one leg out like so. So the idea is that they're in this kind of a position in the background, right? And so their second leg is out like so, as they're trying to steady themselves as they're sitting in the background. And if it helps to structure the whole of the form like that for yourself, to make sure everything's got some consistency and shape, do so. And then we can have their arm pointing off into the distance and saying, "Look, there!" And there's our pointy finger. And so as he's bouncing around and rollicking here and there, he's still, attuned in enough that he can see what's coming up in the distance. And so we'll give him a hat. And again, we're playing on this silly part of this story. So we're going to have the front of his hat folding up in the wind to make him look less than cool. There, and we'll give him the accoutrement with the little pouch jacket and pouch vest and all of his expensive ephemera that he's bought for himself to feel like big game hunter. So when it comes to drawing in our Jeep, the back of our Jeep here, we can have some of these elements where they've got, let's say packs strapped to the back of the Jeep. And we don't need to be overly worried about, seeing every element. So here's the spare tire on the back. Here's some of those things. And we'll have, the guns. Another silly bit of business is to have the guns bouncing around in the back as well. And no sort of degree of safety or assurity here. And then we'll have this one box bouncing up, and then we'll have the next box below it in order to make you understand that everything's not sitting flat and smooth. Then these two, we're going to imply that these two boxes of, let's say, ammo or whatever are moving in different directions. So one of the things that we can do to sort of sell this a little bit further is that we can take our Jeep vehicle, and if this is our front tire well, say here, then we can have the tire turning inward. And the reason that I'm drawing the tire turning in an alternate direction of the way the vehicle is moving is that I want to imply that he's wheeling around. Like there's, you know, if the reader goes so far as to look at the direction that the wheel is sitting in the tire well, and then we can put forward this idea clear enough that they can notice that the tire is turning, that the Jeep is turning and veering around. And we can do this a couple different ways, is that we can have some smoke changing its course of direction here as the Jeep is skittering around. And we can put a couple of movement lines in as though it's wheeling about. So now we've got these three absurd characters in our background, and you know, just having a supplied image like something like this lets us start to understand how our characters sit within space from a specific kind of a camera view. You don't need to reproduce the figures. What we're trying to, because we have a basic understanding of, you know, stick people. If this is our stick person, like so, okay, and we're looking at it from a different angle, where let's do extreme foreshortening. So now we're looking at our stick person from down below. And so we know that this part of them is going to be thicker and more full in our field of view because we're looking up at them. And so we're going to see more of their hands than we are of their shoulders. And if you need a really good example of that, look at pictures of David by Michelangelo. David by Michelangelo. Michelangelo da Buonarroti. So if you look at those, his hands and his feet and his head are bigger than the majority of the form. The form is slightly smaller than those specific elements are. And the reason for that is when you are a viewer participant standing in front of the statue and it's 14 feet tall, so even someone like me, 5'18", as I'm looking up at that statue, it's an imposing, visage, right? So, but what really sells it home is the fact that those hands are slightly larger to more readily define interesting details, because the foreshortening of looking up at that figure is already going to present things in an interesting way, and so you're going to put a little bit of oomph, a little bit of kick on those. So we understand, even drawing our stick people, that as we're looking up at our figure, we're going to see more of these lower parts that are closer to us, and there's almost going to be like a receding line up to a vanishing point for those figures to be in. And conversely, if we're looking at them from a downward angle, and here they are looking up at us, we're only going to see so much of their body because, we're looking at it from a top-down perspective. So we might see the upper part of their arms and maybe their hands sticking out a little bit at the sides and their feet sticking out, but their body becomes incredibly, and this is apt, truncated. So we can still look at these and assess these things with stick figures, but when you have a supplied thing like that, it just gives you a little bit of that insight for you to start to play with something as straightforward and simple as that, and eventually it helps you to inform you about perspective in your more rounded out or more finished images. So, okay, I'm going to grab a different color again, and what I'm going to draw now is that third, or that farther away plane. So if we are in, let's say, the Serengeti or whatever it might be, we're going to have this small tree with some tufts of green on it, and you know, maybe there's something resting underneath or not, or there's some rocks that are here and there, but for the most part there's not an awful lot in this landscape. But what we can do to play with this idea a little bit further, we're going to do two things. One is we're going to put in this crazy raised mountain area in the background just to add a little bit of a visual, you know, bit of fun for the viewer. We can do all kinds of things with the sky and just to give it some shape, okay? But one of the things that we can further our crazy with for this rollicking adventure that our characters are having is that as we played with this idea of the dust and so forth coming off of the car, so that we can, you know, give a sense to a reader that they're whizzing around. Well, with our with our smoke and dust from the road, we can draw our characters having kind of done a kind of a zigzag pattern here through the desert, so that as we're coming up to the foreground, they've really been just a winding about. You see one over there? No, I don't see you. Let's go over there. Oh, and this person's driving like a crazy guy. So you've got this. So there's our structure for our first panel, right? For our suggestion of hunting stuffed animals on safari. And so the one guy says, you know, look, there's some over there. We got a couple different directions that we can take this. You know, we can sit down and next jump to the actual view of the what it is that they're hunting. In this case, because it's a silly hook, because there's a silly angle on this, that they're stuffed animals, I think that for this page, we should leave that till the end and apply a seriousness to how we're executing these characters in their crazy hunting excursion. Oh, that's very nice, Linda. Linda's saying it's nice to make you to come on out. So for our next panel, right, we can have you know a couple different directions. We can either show just over there in that ridge, we can, you know, do a close-up of some trees and some silhouette shapes, and or we can have these guys wheel to a stop and getting their you know their guns out or whatever it might be. I think that might be kind of fun, so that we can have the ridiculousness of these guys thinking they're sneaking up on whatever it is that they're paying for their hunting excursion. You know, I'm not sure what people do when they do those things, but okay. So if we draw, we can do a couple things. We can do something like this where, you know, the vehicle is pulling to a stop. So we can do a very thin, and so I'm going to do this whole thing with vertical panels. So we can have the Jeep, and what we'll do is we'll look at it from it as a silhouette, as a shape, okay? And we know we've got our two characters in the foreground, and we can have our third character holding on to the bar in the back. So here's our Jeep pulling to a big stop. Okay? And then that's our whole panel. But in our foreground, just to sort of set the tone for our environment, we can do some scrub brush in the foreground, and we can have a peak of some, and there's some rocks in here, and we can draw a peek at here's a character. There's an animal in silhouette here. We haven't got it too clearly defined, but we could be suggesting that it's some kind of lioness or lion cub. And I gotta get back. Hey, Paul, it's great to see you. Thank you very much for popping in, sir. Super cool. Appreciate you peeking in there, my friend. So here's, and of course we'll do some little bits of rocks and things like that, and a couple smaller pieces of scrub brush. By having the scrub brush in the foreground and the scrub brush in the midground be smaller and less complex than what's in our foreground, it helps us to understand this is closer than this is. And we can even sell that further by having another smaller one in between this and where the Jeep is. So we'll have our little raising dust cloud coming off of these silly people as they've skidded to a stop. And then, of course, narratively, we can say, I'm pulling over, I'm pulling over. There we are. So, thanks very much, Linda. So there's our second panel. And we've done it at this reduced size in order to have it just be like this tiny thing and it stops. And so now we can have our main character, and he'll do his little hand signal in the air here. Okay. Let me do this. There we are. So our main guy will do his little hand signal in the air. And he's got his gun in his hand. Under his arm there. He's ready to shoot something. But we'll have him in this little Action Jackson pose. Follow me, lads. I'll show you how to shoot the lions, right? And so as he's edging forward towards our little character that we know is in that foreground, and we'll give him a little bit of some dramatic movement there, just exaggerated a tiny bit, just to give the sense that man on the move, And we'll put our two characters in behind. We can and we can make extra silly with this, and because this isn't a serious hunting expedition group here, these are people that are, of course, rich safari goers that don't actually know what they're doing. So we can have our first character brushing the dust out of his pant legs. And so we'll have his one hand here. And we can have the third character say, what are you doing? He says, I'm brushing the dust out. Right? And what are you doing? What are you doing? So, and we'll have him with the guns. He's got the one gun already. And he's got the other gun for, let's say, his older brother. And he's ready to go. And there's a guy in the foreground. I'll do this with the hand, just so you can distinctly separate it from the guys in the back. And here he says, all right, lads, be quiet now. Meanwhile, the ridiculousness of that is the fact that they're driving like absolute lunatics, or he's driving like an absolute lunatic. So here's this panel you know, and it gives, doing this a little bit wider gives us a little bit of choice to move some shapes around, right? And we'll have him behind. Well, let's use this scrub brush on this side, right here in the foreground. And we'll do it to the same size as this one, but moving it down so you don't think that they're the same one. But this informs us, because of the previous panel, the reader understands that they are now here, because this is on that side and not this side. So, so there we go. So we've got 3 panels along as we're moving towards our big finish, that they're hunting stuffed animals on safari. And so then we can have, so what I'll do here is that I'll have him down towards the ground, right? We'll have his knees up, legs pulled back, there we go. And then we'll have him turning and saying, "What are you doing? Get down, you crazy dingoes." And then we'll have that gun aimed down like so, as he's ready for that, to take that shot. And then we'll have these 2 guys just wandering up behind him like they're, this is where we shoot the goats, you know. And we can have the one character, we can continue this motif of his, you know, uncomfortableness, and having him cough a little bit, like this, you know, so as they're, and he's got his gun here. And then the third character, I guess, but really their poses are not ones that say, you know, here we are, action guys. And then the other brother is going to be a little more ready with his gun as he's coming up behind our guide. But he's sort of holding his in an awkward kind of way, like it's a, I don't know, baseball bat, hockey stick, something. So, you know, and then we can have these guys conversing. You know, "All right, lads, be quiet now. Hush up. The animals might know we are here." And then so anyways, I'm going to shoot a big one. I'm going to shoot a big one. And he says, "Cough, cough, cough." And he says, "What?" And this one says, "It's Dusty." There we go. And then this guy says, "Hush up. The animals might know we're here." And then we'll close this out. We'll take it to its conclusion. So let's do 2 more panels and we're all set. And our 4th panel will be him lining up the shot. Or, you know what, better still. So we'll have this, the third brother, and the way that we'll differentiate them, of course, is that he's got his silly hat, and his hat is never on the top of his head, right? And so the brother with the silly hat will be holding up his gun. I'm trying to think of how you shoot a gun. So if his hand's here, how do they do that? They do it like this. So if he's got his hand here and he's preparing for his shot, and then the guy will be standing behind him and saying, take it easy now. And then we'll have the second brother saying, you're doing really great, Larry. So I'm going to move his head back a little bit. We're going to scale this a little bit different here. So we'll have him like so. And then we'll have the hunter who's leaning over him. And he's saying, easy now, aim at this part of him. Right? Let me draw that in a second. The second color so you can differentiate the foreground guy and the background guy. So here's our background guy. And then this is the shape of our foreground guy. And he's got his gun. There's his little face. And so we'll have him lying in the dirt. Okay. And then the third, this character here with his head behind will say, you're doing great. In the background. There's his hat behind his head. So, and he's saying, line it up. And we'll have him say, you're doing, and this one will say, hush. And so we'll continue this dialogue that crosses over between the two. And then you're doing great in the next panel. A larger balloon around it with smaller words. And then we'll have him say, line it up, And then ready? And then we'll have him sticking his tongue out the side. All kinds of silly business. And as we've got some of this desert floor area here in front of him, we can have a little lizard doing his whole foot up, foot down thing. I don't know if you've ever seen a lizard, but there's some lizards that when they're walking on the hot desert sand, they'll occasionally have one side of their body up in the air and then put the other side of the body up in the air, just to give one side of the padding of their feet a break from the hot desert floor. And so as he's lining it up, and here comes the big finish, is that we draw, in this. So here's the sagebrush that we first showed here in our second panel, and we'll put some stuffed tigers in there. And just to sort of sell it home, we'll have a stuffed teddy bear as well. And we'll put a stuffed ostrich where the head's kind of hanging to the side. I don't know if you've ever seen like a sort of stuffed toy of an ostrich where the neck never stays together. So we'll have that in the background. It's just basically a bunch of safari-based stuffed animals that he's just got arrayed in the brush. And so this whole thing is based on our suggestion of hunting stuffed animals on safari. And so, we try to play it a little bit madcap, but ideally, our reader follows the narrative with us through the page. And so if they're following it through here to here to here to here, and it's a little more ridiculous as we go, and then by the end you realize they're lining their sights up on stuffed animals in the bush, well, it just ends flat out absurdly. So, but in getting ourselves to this point, it sort of gives us a bit of, a bit of play. There's a little watering area, and you can say, over there near the waterway, or near the drinking pond, because those are real patterns of animals in hot climates, is that oftentimes they'll all go to the same place to drink. But what we're really playing with is expectation, and the idea that here's these goofy guys on this journey with this guy, their guide, I guess he is, and all of this leads to them hunting something that they could do in their living room at home. So it's just escalating silly. There's a movement through the page that sort of shrinks things down into focus as we go across, I guess. Just to draw the reader along by tightening up the images as we go from panel to panel, the space that the image takes up. The text fills in the remainder, but by tightening up where the image fills, it sort of heightens attention a little bit as well by compressing things. So, AK says, pure transparency. I'm working well watching. You're a good teacher, my friend. Oh, that's very nice. I appreciate that. The whole idea, it doesn't matter the format of our page, and it doesn't matter the format of the panels that we're using. It doesn't, you can, and this is why you can do so many different things sequentially, with sequential visuals and text together, is that you can explore all kinds of different avenues. There's a page that I did where the entire shift of the panels was on an angle, and the reason for doing so is that it's this hillbilly world, and yet underneath the ground of this hillbilly world is this incredibly complex scientific society that pretends to be these backwater, moonshine mountain boys to, dissuade anybody from coming and investigating their advanced culture that lives underground in this mountainous region. So it's a fun, silly take on it. So that skewed perspective, well, we skewed the perspective of the page. We skewed the angle of the page just to sort of play on that conceit. So, there's pages, I've done pages where the entire image is spiralic. So it moves around the outside of the page and works its way into the center. And as you follow it in, you get to, if you follow it in those ways, and optimally the text is what takes us directionally through the visuals, because if you're just relying on the visuals, people will jump out of whatever the panel is into the next one, because you're not constraining them in there by them having to follow the textual elements. So it's all about playing with this combination of these two things, and you can put all kinds of additional exposition into the panels. Like here I've got this dust cloud. Now it could look like the Jeep is still just careening crazy and worming its way back and forth, but by having I'm pulling over, it sort of explains to the reader that no, this isn't just more careening around the desert, this is actually pulling over without having anybody get out. Because the next panel is where these two are lazily getting out, and okay, here we go, you ready? We're going to shoot. And it's like, I'm covered in dust. So that we can play with that timing a little bit more, right? So, because if we have them pulling over and both of them jumping out, it's too fast, right? We want this guy to brush off his dust without characters having to go back to get him. Come on, hurry up, get up here with us. No, they're just, neither of these guys belong in this environment. Well, neither, and nobody in here involved should be in this environment. But these two are completely out of place this way. And of course, you can draw the Jeep parked in the background, and this is all just the dust cloud of smoke that they've produced. But as they walk up, and the one guy's holding his gun, kind of, I got my gun, here, I'm ready, and that's not how you shoot it. And the other one's carrying it with his hand, like he's just, like he's got a broomstick, And so it just, and meanwhile, the trapper guy's all laid out like he's been in the Marines. So it's just playing with the visual aspect of the characters and trying to expand in our story a little bit by really leaning into their characteristics for each individual. So, I think that this is a fun one. I think that it comes together pretty quick and easy. Of course, this is just roughing it out. But by roughing it out and using some of these different, pencil, pen, marker, whatever you feel comfortable using, and using some of these different colors helps to, clarify for us that he's in the foreground of these two, or I put the purple around his hand so you can see as he's doing his fancy signal, let's see, this way, boys. I can't, there we go. This way, we're going that way. He's all Action Jackson. Meanwhile, they're like, oh, it's pretty out here, So there's a bunch of different ways that we can explore character. Then it's more than just jumping through the air, punch, kick, whatever. And we can add all kinds of different elements to it. The stream of conceit in this story that I'm finishing it off, there's all kinds of dialogue on the pages, and there is an actual story that takes place throughout the book. But there's a second level of text that's on it where it's me talking about whatever. And there's a bunch of different topics that I talk about through the course of it, but it's a stream of consciousness book. And so while I want to draw these pictures, as I'm working on this page, I'm also thinking of X, Y, Z. And so while the whole narrative is there and the story is there, and there is some cross-pollination of the two, it's two layers of text. There's two layers of story in that. So you can read it, reading both elements together on each page as you go by. You can read it with just the text of what's happening in the story, the visual story, and do a run through of it that way. Or you can just read the narrative text and run through it that way. So just because, again, from a stream of consciousness perspective, it's not just what we're producing. It's not just the things that we're laying out in the pages and the stories therein. It's also part and process of how we go about doing that. So that's what this book plays with. I can never just do something straightforward. I always gotta be somehow silly about it. But there we go. So we've got our page today structured together pretty nicely. Thank you, Salty, for the suggestion for that. Today's page is already posted on Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon. And I'll be posting a whole bunch more stuff on Patreon as well that are these sort of weekend doodled pages that I do that, don't go anywhere. So rather than putting 42 out at the end of the year, I thought I'd just start getting those out now. So, weekend pages. All right. Okay, that's it for me, everybody. Thanks very much for everybody coming out, everybody taking part in the chat. Thank you very much to Linda, the moderator with the mostest. And I'll be back tomorrow for our regular Tuesday at 2. Guaranteed. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Have a great day. Go and try to apply some of the things we talked about today. All right, bye for now. Oh, wrong button. There we go.